picture this. It's February 2026, and the world just stops. A crisis erupts, and suddenly the most critical energy artery on the entire planet is blocked. Now, this wasn't just another news headline. Oh no, this was the starting gun for a complete rewiring of the global economy. So how on earth did one single event, in one tiny location, trigger such a massive shift? Well, let's get into it.
In just 3 weeks, something that was basically unthinkable happened. Vessel traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, this is the lifeblood of the global energy system, it plummeted by 94%. What used to be a superhighway of oil tankers just fell silent.
And you can bet the markets felt it. The reaction was immediate and just brutal. In only 8 days, the price of Brent crude oil shot up by 58%, hitting $126 a barrel. That's the highest it had been since the 2008 financial crisis.
But look, this shockwave went so far beyond what you paid at the pump. What we're really unpacking today is how this single event became the catalyst for a decade of forced, unbelievably rapid change in pretty much everything, from food security all the way to the race for AI dominance.
So first things first, let's really dig into the immediate fallout. What actually happens when the world's most critical energy artery is suddenly and completely paralyzed?
The Strait of Hormuz is, to put it simply, the world's energy jugular. At its skinniest point, it's only about 39 kilometers, or 21 miles, wide. It's tiny, but the amount of energy flowing through that tiny gap, it's just staggering.
And this slide, this is where things get really crazy. You're looking at about 1/5 of all global oil and 1/5 of all liquefied natural gas passing through this one spot. Every single day. And where's it all going? Look at that. Over 80% of it is headed straight for Asia. We're talking about huge economies like China, India, Japan, and South Korea. They are completely, terrifyingly dependent on this single point of failure.
And this timeline just shows you how fast everything fell apart. From the moment the blockade was announced, it took just over 3 weeks for the number of ships to go from over 1,200 a day down to just 77. The result? A massive, ongoing supply gap of 8 to 10 million barrels of oil a day. And let me tell you, that is a hole you just can't plug overnight. Okay, but here's the thing. The real story here, the one that caught pretty much everyone off guard, isn't just about oil. The shockwaves triggered this insane domino effect, and it led to something way more fundamental, a global food crisis. So how does that happen? Well, it all comes down to this hidden supply chain that most of us never even think about. See, natural gas from the Middle East, it's a critical ingredient for making fertilizer. So when that gas flow gets cut, fertilizer plants grind to a halt. And just like that, you choke off a whopping 38% of the world's nitrate fertilizer supply. That's not just a problem for farmers, it's a direct threat to global food security.
And wow, the numbers really tell the story, don't they? The price of urea fertilizer, up 32% in 1 week. The cost to ship anything on one of those massive supertankers? It nearly doubled. Even jet fuel in Europe took a huge hit, since 30% of its supply is tied to the strait. This wasn't just an energy shock. This was an everything shock.
So this absolute catastrophe forced everyone to stop and think. Was this the end of an era? The final nail in the coffin for the old energy order? Or was it the painful, messy, but totally necessary beginning of a new one?
Because out of all that chaos, something really powerful started to happen. A new trend emerged, the Great Energy Acceleration. Look, this crisis didn't invent the energy transition, but it sure as heck slammed the accelerator to the floor.
So what does this new world look like? Well, it's being built around 3 key pillars. First, you've got solar and wind, which just keep getting cheaper and better. Second, you have this surprising, almost strategic comeback for nuclear power. And third, hydrogen is finally moving from just an idea to something real. And the wild card underpinning all of this? A massive new hunger for electricity, driven by the AI revolution. For 20 years, nuclear power was basically on the sidelines. People were worried about costs, about safety. It was just out of favor. But the Hormuz crisis completely flipped the script. All of a sudden, the top priority for countries wasn't just cheap energy anymore, it was secure energy. And that's where nuclear, with its reliable 24/7 power, suddenly became an absolute game changer.
And nowhere was this shift felt more urgently than for the world's island nations. For them, this wasn't about the economy. This was about survival. Period.
Just look at this. It's terrifying. On one side, you've got Taiwan. They have an 11-day reserve of natural gas. 11 days. And their power grid is totally isolated. On the other side, you've got Japan, the world's biggest LNG importer. They're a little better off with maybe 3 weeks of buffer, but it's still incredibly precarious. Both of them were pushed right to the edge.
So what do? Well, Taiwan, which you could argue is the Achilles heel of the entire global energy system, is making a massive bet. They're going all in on deep geothermal energy. I'm talking drilling way down into the earth to tap its natural heat. Why? Because it's stable, it's homegrown, it runs 24/7, and it doesn't care about geopolitics or the weather. It's a huge risk for sure, but the reward is total energy independence.
Now, Japan is playing it a little differently. They're pursuing a dual strategy. On one hand, they're firing up their dormant nuclear fleet to get that reliable baseload power. And at the same time, they're going big on floating offshore wind. We're talking about unlocking a mind-boggling 400 gigawatts of potential with turbines out in deep water where the wind is just relentless.
But here's the twist. As the world sprints away from oil, there's a new danger lurking in the shadows, a new dependency. And you have to ask, are we just trading one set of shackles for another? Okay, this chart right here, you need to pay attention to this because it explains the next decade of geopolitics. To build all those batteries and solar panels and wind turbines, you need a ton of critical minerals. And right now, China has a stranglehold on processing them. We're talking nearly 100% of the world's natural graphite and the vast majority of its cobalt and lithium. This wasn't an accident. This was decades of very smart, very deliberate industrial strategy.
And as if that wasn't enough, we are barreling towards a massive supply crunch. By 2035, projections show we're going to be short 40% of the lithium we need and a staggering 60 to 65% short on graphite for batteries. This right here is the single biggest bottleneck standing in the way of the entire energy transition.
So it all comes down to this really simple but powerful paradox. The geopolitics of the 20th century were defined by being dependent on a few oil choke points, just like the Strait of Hormuz. While the 21st century, it's shaping up to be about dependence on a few mineral supply chains, and in some ways, they're even more concentrated and more vulnerable.
At the end of the day, what the Hormuz crisis really did was force a complete rewiring of how we think about energy. For decades, the name of the game was efficiency. Get the most power for the cheapest price. But what this crisis taught us is that energy security, that resilience, it's not just a nice-to-have. It is the very price of survival in this new, more volatile world.
And that leaves us with the billion-dollar question for the next decade. The race to break free from our dependency on fossil fuels is on, and it's happening faster than ever. But are we actually securing true energy freedom? Or are we just blindly walking into a brand new trap, one built not of oil, but of copper, lithium, and cobalt?